The Russian attack north of Kharkiv continues, and Kiev is pouring reinforcements into the area. But what is Russia's objective? What do they say they've achieved so far? And what are the prospects for Russia's ultimate goal of seizing Kharkiv? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's talk about it. So, taking a look at the control map, you can see there's two areas that have been listed as contested. You can see this is as of 2 days ago, right? Early morning of the 10th, you saw Russian forces drive across this front here near Strelechka, Pilna, and Borisivka. And then you've also got them pushing here near Pletenivka. Now, you can see in the last maybe 24 hours, they've made some other gains, right? Advancing down the Lipets River here towards Lukyansky and Krasne. And while these are not necessarily major villages or significant urban areas, and as we've talked about, this cluster of villages could serve as a foothold, but it's got kind of a deeper constraint, right? Because Leipzig is only connected really through this one roadway here. Other than that, it's going to be Russian forces crossing a lot of open ground. So for Ukraine, I strongly suspect you're going to see them kind of withdraw from this cluster of villages and set up here in what ends up being just kind of a fire support area that is really set up to punish Russian forces that try to drive into this region. I think you're going to see something similar occurring here near Pletenivka. Now, the big issue that I think should most worry Ukraine is if indeed Russian forces have crossed the Donets. And if they're across the Donets, it means that this natural barrier that the Donets forms that would otherwise keep these two attacks from being mutually reinforcing isn't going to serve that function. Because otherwise, you see how Russia could execute a sort of pincer maneuver or an envelopment, something that is pretty doctrinally fundamental to how they operate, but only if they can operate across the Donets River and conduct a sustained river crossing, or more likely own both sides of the river. But you could see they're going to have to actually own a lot of it because there's not really a easy crossing point. So they're going to have to own some sort of bridge here that lets them cross the Donets that Ukraine can't take out. And as you've seen in the Ukrainian effort to conduct similar operations, this is in the south near Kherson, it's very, very difficult, really impossible in this war to maintain a fixed bridge location. And as we've talked about, right, this efforts to hold places like Kharkiv, Ukraine has sort of sustained this effort, but it hasn't really returned any gains. Ukraine has stuck a bridgehead here in order to tie up these Russian units to keep them from deploying elsewhere on the front. And so that could be the Russian strategy here as well. This could just be about tying up Ukrainian units, right? They know that they're not going to make large sweeping gains towards Kharkiv. That said, 50,000 troops is a lot of troops for the Russian military, and it seems unlikely that this is part of just kind of a delaying action. So when we look over here, this is where things get even more interesting, right? 5 hours ago, the Russian Ministry of Defense claimed it established control over Borisivka, Ohertsevi, Pletenivka, Pilna, and Strelecha. And you could see that these are all the kind of the villages that operate on the border regions here. But again, it remains contested. The Ukrainians, in turn, claim that they've stabilized the situation and that Russia doesn't actually hold control here. Now, you could see, again, Russian forces looking like they've crossed this forested area here in an attempt to seize Ohertsevi. But again, it's not really clear if these are mutually supporting efforts, right? Russia hasn't claimed control over Hatshiche. And so do they have this area controlled, controlling either side of the Donets? It's really unclear. This is a fast developing situation, but I think for Russian forces, they likely do want to establish this foothold here. And for Ukrainian forces, their primary goal is to contain the Russian breach and to inflict enough casualties that Russia is unable to really achieve their ultimate objective of Kharkiv. Again, 50,000 troops. You're not going to be able to hold these handful of villages, not with the current Ukrainian strategy that relies so much on deep strikes, right? Because you know that Ukrainian forces generally don't do a ton of disruptive attacks in Russia proper. Instead, they are much more likely, or at least Ukraine, the aid they receive, the weapons they receive, they have a much broader mandate to use them inside Ukrainian sovereign territory. And so I think they may sit there and say, hey, listen, we want the Russians to come into these villages so that they can be targeted with our weapon systems. But again, how worried am I that this is going to be some kind of big, stunning breakthrough? I am not that worried. Not yet, anyway. I haven't seen anything that looks like a big Russian breakthrough. Again, their rate of gain seems slower even than their big breakthrough in Ulcheratina, which again, tied up a lot of their forces and contained a lot of Russian, or occupied a lot of Russian units. Anyway, guys, that's all I wanted to cover. We're going to do at least one more update later today to keep you guys abreast of the situation. If you're interested in seeing some of the original combat footage from this fighting, that video is going to drop Tuesday, but only for members on combatvetnews.com. You guys know sponsors really don't like to sponsor any of my videos. YouTube routinely demonetizes them. It's just the nature of being a war creator. That's why I depend on you guys, the fans, for your support. So if you want any one of these tiers, we'll get you access to the twice weekly breakdowns of the viral combat footage of the last week. But of course, if you want to support us at the lieutenant or colonel tier level, I definitely shout you guys out at the end of videos. So be sure to hit like and subscribe. That doesn't cost you anything. But if you want, check us out, combatvetnews.com. And we'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers.